everyone, and welcome to this edition of Budding Solutions, a series on disease and pest management in cannabis sativa. My name is Kim Leonberger, and I'm an Extension Associate in the Plant Pathology Department at the University of Kentucky. In this episode, we are going to take a closer look at corn earworm and fall armyworm. To discuss these important insect issues, I would like to introduce Dr. Julian Cosner. Julian is a biosystems scientist researching phenotypic responses in multi-partite interactions to improve our ability to grow crops. He finished his PhD in entomology, plant pathology, and nematology last year at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. His dissertation focused on investigating integrated pest management strategies to control insect pests on hemp, specifically corn earworm and tobacco budworm, using cultural and biological control. Julian is going to share a few slides with us about these insects, and then we will have some time for a few questions. Welcome, Julian.
Awesome. All right. Well, good to be here. I'm excited to talk to you all, especially about some lepidopteran pests that we've had in Tennessee and how, it relates to the broader southeastern region of the U.S. Let's see. So insect pest and insect pest management in general on hemp is a work in progress, often observed, but rarely causing any significant loss, or common defoliators like Japanese beetles and grasshoppers. Cannabis aphids and hemp russet mites have been found in fields and greenhouses. These are sapsuckers, and they can cause considerable damage if not dealt with. However, I think the floral feeders really directly impact the marketable floral tissue, as a lot of the hemp that's grown, at least in our part, is primarily for CBD. So if you've grown hemp outdoors, you've likely seen armyworms, like the fall armyworm or the yellow striped armyworm, which are these pictures here on the right, as well as the bead armyworm. And these insects lay egg clutches that release hundreds of caterpillars, as you can see in that top left photograph, at which time they appear really worrisome. But in general, they cause little damage, as they mostly feed on the leaves themselves and really only become a problem when there's an outbreak following warm and rainy weather. So of all the lepidopteran, or the moth and butterfly larvae that are found on hemp, corn earworm and tobacco budworm are by far the most abundant and destructive in outdoor hemp production. So as larvae, these insects feed on developing fruiting and floral structures of many agricultural crops. The female moths lay their eggs individually on hemp whenever flowering starts. So as the larvae feed and develop, the flowers then are damaged, which impacts the marketable portion of the plant. And then once mature, these larvae will burrow a few inches into the ground, where they overwinter as pupae. So this, to compound the problem, these insects are able to have multiple generations in Tennessee. So as this insect undergoes complete metamorphosis, these larvae molt through several instars, or developmental periods, as they grow in both size and the degree of damage to which they're capable of. So from the 4th to 6th instar, those are late stage. These larvae tunnel through these floral clusters that we have, producing a damp frass, which can lead to fungal growth within those clusters, while also lacerating the base of the reproductive branch tips. And those are a lot of big words and complicated, but really this type of damage becomes evident nearing harvest. So these pests are what we call polyphagous, meaning that they feed on a variety of plant species. So the likelihood of them going away is next to zero. So it's important that we understand their biology, as it will influence our pest management strategies. So I mentioned complete metamorphosis, also known as holometabolism, meaning these insects have 4 distinct life stages: the egg, the larva, the pupa, and the adult, with significant morphological and behavioral changes between stages. So tobacco budworm is very similar to corn earworm in how long it takes to complete its life cycle, but it's just a little bit slower and smaller as far as development. So these insects are often confused with one another, which complicates this issue of a pest complex. And to be honest, they're often misidentified, because the larvae bear a similar resemblance and often display different color morphs, which fluctuate depending on the environment and their diet. So how do we tell these species apart as larvae when we normally see them on hemp? The easiest way is the presence of these microspines at the base of the setae, or hairs, on the back of the insect. So you'll primarily see this distinction on the first two and the last abdominal segment. They'll be kind of raised and they have these little, furry bits around it. And even though it takes a little bit of practice, once you see the distinction, often on tobacco budworm, they're more pronounced and darker. You can really tell what the dominant pest species is occurring in your area. So the adults are easily separated based on the color and pattern of their hind wings. And though their damage is similar on hemp, it's important really to distinguish these two species as they're known to differ in their plant host, their insecticide susceptibility, especially those Bt toxins, the seasonal distribution, pheromone trap effectiveness, and even their parasitic natural enemies. So these aspects tie into what's called an integrated pest management program, which you're more than likely familiar with, but you may have heard it called IPM, which is a multidisciplinary approach to effectively control pest populations in an ecological and sustainable way. So not all insects require management action. And I would recommend that if you're unsure whether it is in identifying what the pest you have or trying to figure out when would be the best time to create a control strategy, I would definitely consult with an expert and consider the cost of application through the lens of IPM. So in my area, the most effective way that found to manage corn earworm and tobacco budworm is by selecting the right hemp variety for your location. So I created these graphs to show a little bit of the research that I did in the past to show the distribution of these pests is actually dependent on variety or cultivar, and it's going to change based on the region or part of the state that you're in because the environmental parameters change, which influences the rate and the length of that flower window. So you can see the drastic difference in the number of larvae measured by that y-axis on the left, as well as how they correspond with flowering time throughout the growing season. So as far as chemical control, insecticidal products are labeled for use on hemp, but many of the products that are available have shown limited efficacy in other states. Most of the products are bio-based, and they require a life cycle understanding really to target the susceptible stages of these insects because most of these bio-based or biopesticides they have short persistence as they're exposed to environmental conditions, or they need direct contact with the larvae themselves, and it may even require ingestion by the larvae. So this makes it difficult to control these insects with chemical control treatments on hemp specifically because the floral material provides a protective cover that develops as it grows and kind of keeps these susceptible larvae protected. And so this is one of the more exciting things that I've found in my research, and that's the use of biological control. So starting up at the top left, just about every aspect of this insect is parasitized or fed upon by another insect. So we see these trichogramma wasps that lay their eggs inside of the egg of a caterpillar. You can imagine how small those really are. But what we see a lot in the field is that top middle picture. It's a species of parasitic wasp called Campylidus. And these are really important in our area because they impact the small larvae at the first through second instar before any type of serious damage can ensue. But there on the top right, we also see different types of assassin bugs that feed matched with that middle bottom picture, which are those predatory stink bugs. And this goes back in to show that not all bugs are bad. And I know, especially from Raul's work up in Kentucky, that those tachinid flies, those are in the bottom left. These flies are parasitic in that they lay their eggs on the back of these larvae, but it's generally whenever the larvae have reached a size where they've already caused considerable damage. And then on the bottom right, this is just another type of parasitic wasp called Cotesia, in which you might see a lot of little bitty parasitoid wasp larvae emerge out of a caterpillar at one time. So if you have these in area, that's good. If not, it'd be cool if there was a way to introduce it. But I think that'll kind of really be the next step in research for hemp pest management. And I really want to thank you for your time. And, I'm willing to answer any questions. If you need any type of expert advice, you're more than welcome to contact me at my email. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Julian. I really, really appreciate you sharing all of that really valuable information with us. So just a couple of questions for you. The first one being, you touched on some cultural practices as well as some biological controls that can be used for these insects. How would you rate the efficacy of those when you compare them to something like traditional insecticides?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, unfortunately, a lot of conventional pesticides aren't available for use in hemp for flower, though we're starting to see a little bit of a transition shift in the mindset towards it. But I believe that the first step of any integrated pest management program should be a look at cultural practices, and then on the tail end would be conventional pesticides. So, what are ways that we can prevent damage from either occurring or lessen the degree of damage that ensues? And cultural practices are really important in that step. And I touched on it a little bit with varietal selection. So I believe selecting the right variety for your area, one that flowers later on in the growing season when the temperature decreases, which is going to correspond with lower insect activity, would really be ideal. And I think that those biological controls, we need more an understanding on where they're at and how much they can actually impact pest populations, but I can see them being especially significant in our area for 1 year. Last year, we actually noticed that they controlled upwards to a quarter of the larvae themselves that we collected, reared out these adults. So I think that there's good promise for them.
Excellent. And it sounds like there's exciting things on the frontier there. You mentioned a little earlier on in your presentation about the wide host range that these insects have. How do you feel that makes them rate in terms of importance when we talk about other insect pests?
Yeah. So the wide host range is really important, especially when you think about hemp production, because these insects aren't going away. They have such a broad agricultural impact, both from the host plants that they are a part of, whether it's tomato or cotton or soybeans. So just about anywhere that there's agriculture, going to have these pests that are available. But in addition to that, they also find a lot of wild host plants as different types of plants that they can harbor on, whether it's on field rows or on edge lines. So no matter what, you're likely going to occur or encounter these pests. So it's important to kind of have an understanding of different management strategies, knowing before you get started in hemp production, especially for these two big ones.
Excellent. So last question for you. You touched on that there's obviously a lot of work to be done in this area to better understand some of the control options. But are there other areas of research that are lacking for this specific group of insects?
Yeah, I think, I've mentioned a little bit on variety from a cultural control practice, and I think that it would really be beneficial for growers to have a resource of a compiled list of varieties and distributors that can promise genotypes with strong phenotypic responses. You know their flowering window, you can expect their yield concept, whatever the plant parameter, whether you're going fiber or seed or CBD, you can expect that output to be able to base their growing operation on from the get-go. So if we could get some type of genotype lab or a large list of different varieties that are available for growers with the information that I provided from a pest management perspective on the tail end, I really think that that would be important for improving hemp production.
Thanks again so much for joining us today, Julian. We really, really appreciate it. Just a reminder to our viewers that we'll be posting links to additional resources in the description for this video. Thank you again for joining us today, and we hope to see you on the next edition of Budding Solutions.